Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to talk about all of the books that I read in the month of January. So I have my new 2026 bullet journal and then my trusty reading journal here to go over all of the books that I read. So January was a very interesting reading month for me. At the beginning of January, I was super motivated to read, and I feel like I got through a lot of books, both ebooks right at the end of 2025 and into January. And then I also just had a lot of audiobook holds that came available around that time and that I was really excited to get through. And then towards the end of the month, I really wasn't feeling as excited about any audiobooks or the books I was reading. I was just getting through a little bit slower, which is completely okay. I still ended up getting through 16 books in the month of January, 9 audiobooks, 4 ebooks, and 3 physical books. So let's talk about all of those books. I think the way that I've been doing it the last couple of months is I've just been going in order because that's how I have them in this journal. I just journal about them as I finish the book. So the first book that I finished was Twisted Lies, which is the last book in the Twisted Quartet. And I started this book about 30 minutes before midnight on New Year's Eve, and I read until 3 a.m., which was about 60% of the book. So I got sucked into this one. I really enjoyed the storyline. I think this one was one of my favorites out of that series, and I read that her other series, the King of series, I don't actually know what it's called, it's kind of a spin-off in the same world, so I definitely am going to pick that up as I work my way through some of my ebooks that I have. Then I finished another ebook, Yours for the Season. I finished this one on January 2nd, so I finished that first ebook on January 1st, finished this one on January 2nd. This is one I just wanted a nice little holiday read to close out my winter break. It read like a fanfic of The Proposal, and it was just kind of boring, and the plot was just like very stagnant. There's a lot of repetition of like repeating the same exact words and phrases. I think I would maybe give something else by this author a try, because sometimes holiday books don't necessarily read specifically to that author's writing style. So I liked some of her ideas, however, this book just did not hit for me. The next book that I finished was an audiobook that I listened to on Libby, which was Little Fires Everywhere. This is a book that had been on my TBR list for a very long time, and I put it on hold this fall, and it finally came available for me. And then I felt like this book started out really strong. I liked the concept, I liked the characters, I liked the intrigue and a little bit of mystery, but towards the middle, it just fell flat for me. I got really bored, and I kind of had to force myself to listen to it. The ending got good again, and I ended up enjoying it, but because the middle really fell flat for me, I only gave this about 3 stars. I wish I would have liked it more. The next audiobook, however, I absolutely loved. It was incredibly powerful. It was homegoing, and this was a book I just kept wanting to pick up. The beginning of it, I got a little bit confused because of how the storyline works, but it is a book that delves into the lineage of 2 half-sisters and the impact that the slave trade had on their lineage throughout, I think it's 200 or 300 years, I can't remember specifically, but it just talks about such powerful topics like trauma and power imbalance and what I found really compelling about this author's writing is you're only with each specific character for a short amount of time, but I genuinely felt for those characters. So this is an author that I definitely want to pick up more books by. The next book that I read was a physical book, James. This was supposed to be my book club book for January. However, our discussion got pushed back to February. As you can see, I annotated it, and I love this book. I can see why it won so many awards. It was a very easy read, and I've never read Huckleberry Finn, and I feel like that's something that now I want to read, a classic that really hadn't been on my radar before, because I feel like it could give me a lot more context to this book. But I just found this book and this writing very powerful, and I really enjoyed it. The next book was another book that had been on my radar and on my TBR list for a while. It was The Rose Code, and this is a book about decoding the Enigma during World War II, and I like how this story was told from the perspective of women, and this is one that I just kept seeing pop up, and this is also an author that I see pop up a lot, so I think I want to read more by her. I really took a break from historical fiction like the last year and a half. It just really wasn't hitting for me. At one point in time, historical fiction was my genre, pretty much all I read, and I feel like this book got me back into really enjoying historical fiction. And I listened to that one on audio from Libby. The next book I listened to on audio from Spotify, and it was Bookshops at Bone Dust. I really wanted to get through this series. So this is a prequel to Legends and Lattes, and I enjoyed dipping back into this world. I liked the characters, and I had an enjoyable time with this book. I don't really have a lot of feelings about this series. It's just like a middle of the road series and book for me. The next book that I listened to, I absolutely loved. I wanted to keep picking it up. I listened to it every single chance that I got, and it was Wild Dark Shore. This is a book I had put on my list and I'd seen floating around, and I knew nothing about, or knew very little about, and I'm glad I went into it knowing very little about it. There were a lot of science aspects in it that I really enjoyed. I love reading about science, and the basis of this story is about resilience, specifically human resilience, and I am just so glad that I picked up this book, and it makes me want to read more by this author because the storytelling was so compelling. And I listened to that one on Libby. The next book I also listened to on Libby, another science-y book, science fiction book, was The Three-Body Problem. This one has also been on my radar and has been on my TBR list for a while. And again, I am so glad I finally picked this book up. When I first heard about this book, I knew it would be a book for me. I love physics, I love science, and I liked how there was a lot of actual physics and science discussed, and something that I understand as somebody who reads a lot on those topics. But even if you were somebody who just enjoyed science fiction, this would still be a really compelling book, and I am very excited to pick up the next one. So the first major chunk of this book was very much rooted in real world, and then towards the end of the book is where a lot of the science fiction picks up, and I'm really excited to continue that. The next book that I picked up was Send For Me, and I don't remember why I picked this one up. I liked the concept. I don't remember where I heard about this book. I liked the concept, and the audiobook was available on Libby, but this book was so boring. I actually sped it up because I just wanted to get through it. I just felt like the storytelling wasn't cohesive, and it was very disjointed, and I just felt like how the author chose to tell the story didn't keep the plot moving, and the dual storyline part I just felt was unnecessary, and this book was just very disappointing to me. The next book I read on my Kindle and I got from Kindle Unlimited, it was Red, White, and Royal Blue, and this is another book that had been on my radar for a while and had been on my TBR list. As you can see, I'm very excited to tackle my lists and books that have been on my radar for a while. I'm really trying to work through those, as well as my physical TBR and my other reading goals. This book took me a really long time to read. So I started it on January 2nd, but I finished that other ebook, and I finished it on January 23rd. And I would read this on my lunchtime, but I just felt like this book dragged on, and I just kind of had to force myself through it. Again, I liked the concept of it, but then there were also some events in that are too close to current events that I just also made it less enjoyable to read. So I'm glad this is finally off my list, and I probably won't ever think about this book again. The next book that I read and finished was John Glenn, a memoir, so another physical book. I started this in December and took me about a month to read, which I feel like is pretty good for a memoir. I really enjoyed this book. Even though it's his memoir about his life, I really feel like this is a love letter to his wife. Every chapter and section is just filled with the love he has for her, and he knew her pretty much his entire life. And I just found that really interesting. And then I also loved like the space parts and all of that, which is why I picked this up. But yeah, I really enjoyed it, and this is also one of the older books on my physical TBR, so I'm glad that I got that off. Yeah, and it's also one of my priority books for this year, so can check that off in January. The next book that I listened to was a very short book called Notes on Grief, and I listened to this one on Libby. The audiobook is only about a little over an hour long, so it did not take me very long, just an afternoon to listen to, but I really enjoyed the author's commentary on grief, and specifically her experience losing her father. I just found the writing profound and insightful, and I think I have read excerpts of things by this author before, but I definitely would pick up more by her. The next book that I read was another one off my physical TBR. It was Sinister Graves. This is a mystery book set in South Dakota / Minnesota. Is it South Dakota or North Dakota? One of the Dakotas, in Minnesota. And this is actually the third book in a series, but I picked this up at my local independent bookstore because I want to read more by Indigenous authors. So I liked the concept of this. I really enjoyed it. It was a mystery. I feel like it talked about important things while still holding true to having a mystery, and I enjoyed the characters, so I do want to pick up and read the rest of this series as well. And I have 2 more books to talk about. The next one was another ebook that I read from Kindle Unlimited. This one was called One. This is the sequel to Zero. If you remember, in my last reading wrap up, I talked about Zero, and the reason I picked it up was because it was a title that started with Z, and it is essentially a smutty book. This one again followed some of that, it's a smutty book, that's what it's meant to be, but the author tried to insert a lot of plot into it, and I just don't feel like it worked. So I really don't think I'll be picking up anything else by this author because I don't feel like her writing works for me. And finally, the last book that I finished on January 31st was Brigands and Bread Knives, which is the last full book in the Legends and Lattes series. Honestly, I found this book incredibly boring. I did not care about it. I zoned out through most of it. I didn't pay attention, and so I just kind of forced myself through it to finish it up. I listened to this one on Spotify as well. So I just have, I think, one more short story to finish in this world, and then I am done with it. I feel like out of the 3 full books, the prequel is actually the best one. I don't know if I would read more by this author. I think I would need to be in a very specific mood to read it, but I am glad that I am checking a series off of my series list. So that is everything that I read in the month of January. I'm hoping February will also be a pretty good reading month for me. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.